You might actually think you're pretty private when you're browsing online, but are you simply wearing a mask, or are you truly acting as a ghost? Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to unpack this massive identity crisis that's currently facing the modern web. And we'll look at how Universal Integrated Identity, or UIID, is completely changing the game. We are going to explore that super critical boundary between acting under an alias and disappearing entirely, and how future architectures are being built to support both. Okay, let's quickly map out our agenda for today. We'll kick things off with Section 1, the web's identity crisis, move into pseudonyms versus true anonymity, then explore UID's dual-layer alias network. After that, we'll look at the roadmap to anonymity, ephemeral identities, and seamless conversion, and wrap it all up with fluid digital identity. All right, diving right into Section 1, the web's identity crisis. For literally decades now, the internet's default business model has been, well, highly extractive. It's relied on invasive tracking, profiling, and meticulously stitching together your data across a bunch of different platforms just to build a profile of exactly who you are. But honestly, that era is ending. Decentralized architectures and self-sovereign identity principles are stepping up. But to genuinely give control back to us, we have to realize that privacy is no longer just a single, uniform setting. It's not just a simple on or off switch anymore. To build a web that actually respects our choices, platforms really have to understand the delicate boundary between acting under an alias and disappearing completely. Moving right along to Section 2, pseudonyms versus true anonymity. Let's make sure we clearly define the two sides of our privacy spectrum here. People often use these words interchangeably, but they represent fundamentally different structural realities. First up, pseudonymity. This is essentially replacing a real identity with a persistent, unique identifier, which is an alias. It acts exactly like a mask. Think of a gaming handle, a public crypto wallet address, or some application-specific token. The great thing is it allows platforms to remember your history and your preferences. The downside? Because your actions are linkable over time, a consistent pattern of behavior starts to emerge. You are still vulnerable if external clues are collected and that pattern is unmasked, revealing the real you. Then, on the absolute other end of the spectrum, we have anonymity. This involves processing data or interactions so that an individual is completely unidentifiable. Anonymity leaves absolutely zero trail. It's a ghost footprint. It is exactly like dropping cash into a physical tip jar or reading a public article without any tracking cookies attached. The system literally doesn't know who you are or what you did even 5 minutes ago. But naturally, this introduces a massive user experience challenge, right? The loss of data utility. Since the system cannot remember you, it can't save your progress or protect your session. This comparison really brilliantly illustrates that core divide. Pseudonyms are reversible. The link to your master identity is still there. Sure, it's protected by access controls, but it allows tracking within an isolated context. And because re-identification is technically possible, it's actually classified as personal data under privacy frameworks like GDPR. Anonymity, on the other hand, is totally irreversible. Zero profiling. It falls completely outside the scope of those data protection regulations simply because no personal data exists in the first place. Which brings us to Section 3, UIID's dual-layer alias networks. So, UID currently operates as a state-of-the-art platform specifically designed to master that pseudonymity side of the spectrum. It replaces those incredibly vulnerable password databases with sovereign identity principles. And it pulls this off through a really clever dual-layer structure. On one side, you've got your core ID. This is your permanent, cryptographically unique central anchor. It is held securely by you and verified without ever exposing raw credentials. Then, on the flip side, you have the alias network. Instead of sharing your master core ID with every single app you use, UID generates contextual, disposable sub-identities, your aliases. By completely segregating your core ID from these aliases, different applications, like an e-commerce site and a social media app, can never cross-reference their databases to link your activities together. Now, the absolutely crucial takeaway here is that you retain total, uncompromising control over your pseudonymous lifecycle directly through a standard management layer. You're entirely in the driver's seat, so if you want to step away from an app, you can securely pause that alias. You can lock a context with a private key, or if you're totally done, you can permanently purge an identity context and all of its underlying data nodes from the network entirely. Gone. Let's pivot to Section 4, the roadmap to anonymity. Okay, so isolated aliases are fantastic for preventing corporate cross-tracking, for sure. but sometimes you honestly just don't want a persistent relationship with a website at all. You just want to read an article, browse a store, or test a service out. Which brings us to a super fascinating question. What if you want to browse as a total ghost? What if you want to interact with an application without creating a permanent account or leaving even a single architectural crumb behind? Well, to answer that, we have to look at UID's new native anonymity features that are totally pushing the boundaries of the privacy spectrum right now.
Which perfectly lines us up for Section 5, ephemeral identities and seamless conversion.
This whole privacy-first evolution relies entirely on UID's upcoming Smart Tag and local integration framework. And this framework is what empowers you to act as a complete ghost all through 3 frictionless technical steps: silent session detection, the generation of ephemeral ghost identities, and finally, seamless onboarding conversion. Let's break down exactly how this magic happens behind the scenes. So, step 1 is silent session detection. When you visit a UIID-enabled platform, there's an embedded smart tag that performs a totally silent background check using secure cross-origin, or CORS protocols. It's basically just checking to see if your browser is currently authenticated with a global UIID provider. The real beauty of this, it happens completely in the background, without forcing any of those annoying, immersion-breaking redirects that absolutely ruin the user experience. Then, step 2 kicks in if no active global session is detected. Instead of hitting a super high-friction registration wall, a public cryptographic utility dynamically generates what's called a temporary UID. This temporary identity lives strictly inside your local browser storage, so to the external application servers, you are completely anonymous. There is literally no server-side account or database record for you. However, this temporary ID perfectly solves that data utility problem we talked about earlier. It actually allows the browser to track local state. This means it can save things like your active shopping cart, your layout themes, or your progress in a tool, all while keeping you totally invisible to the external servers. And here is where the real magic happens in step 3, the seamless onboarding conversion. Let's say you decide you actually do want to save your progress. You simply initiate an upgrade path. That temporary ID is passed directly into a registration container. You securely link your local session to a permanent UID account, and boom, all of that anonymous history, your configurations, your shopping cart, all your data points is automatically synced and upgraded into a protected, pseudonymous alias context. You lose literally 0 progress. Bringing it all together in our final section, fluid digital identity. By combining this robust, isolated pseudonymity with automated ephemeral anonymity flows, UID is carving out a completely new path for our digital future. Web apps no longer have to make that terrible choice between forcing users into high-friction registration walls just to save their state or aggressively tracking users blindly with intrusive cookies. You can now move completely fluidly across the digital landscape. You can act as a trusted, verified partner when you need to, you can act as a persistent pseudonym when you're hanging out in your favorite online communities, or you can become a complete shadow whenever you just want to explore without leaving a trace. As platforms rapidly adapt to this new era of sovereign control, we really have to look inward. The technology is finally here to give you absolute command over your entire identity spectrum. So I leave you with this to think about. As you navigate the modern web tomorrow, will your next digital footprint be left by a mask or by a ghost? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time as we continue to decode the architectures of our digital world.